Alright, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the Cutlass Board Games channel where we make games here. And recently I uploaded a video shitting all over the VCard TCG. And look, that's all well and good. That's kind of 90% of the content on YouTube. But what if instead of pulling something apart and talking about how bad it is, what if instead we were constructive and we looked at some ways to fix the problems? What if we looked at redesigning the VCard TCG so that it could actually potentially be a good and fun game to bet, to kind of play? That's the point. That's what we want. That's what people are investing in this card game for. They have all these great creators. They want to play with their favorites, but the game's lacking. So what can we do? What can we do to solve that? Well, first, let's have a look at what I think is maybe the major list of problems that we need to address. The first thing is that we have power level cards, which exist as an 8, which has an ability, a 9, which does not have an ability, and a 10, which does not have an ability. And your goal is to have the highest power level at the end of a round to score a point. So if the 8 has an ability, then I can see an argument where playing an 8 could potentially gain you an advantage enough to bridge the gap from 8 to 10. But if a 9 and a 10 both have no ability, you have no reason to ever play a 9 while 10s exist. And I understand why an 8 has an ability to help you potentially bridge that gap between 8 and 10. But why do 10s have no abilities? Surely playing a 10, or at least some of them, should be your big haymaker that's going to try and help you close out the game and win. So I don't see the reason why 9s and 10s don't have any abilities. But also there's no restrictions on color. So for example, in Magic the Gathering, you have the land mana system where I require mountains to play red cards, and because I have a certain amount of cards in my deck that are mountains, I'm kind of committed to a certain amount to playing red, and then I can, the more colors that I add to it, the harder it is for me to commit for each additional color, because it requires more consistency in my resources to be able to do those things. Pokemon TCG is kind of similar. What energy that I can use to create my attacks is going to determine how crazy and how wide the things that I can get. A lot of support Pokemon are played that can't attack because you don't have the correct colors of energy, but that's the trade-off because you just like leverage it for its ability, like Latios EX on the more recent sets, which lets your basic Pokemon retreat for free, can attack and actually do some decent damage. Most of the decks that are using it are not playing psychic energy, and that's the trade-off that you have for that. This game doesn't have that. You're never limited to play any particular color, but you're actually penalized for not playing every color. If you show up just playing blue, if somebody figures out that you're only playing one color, they just will start to strategize to go and find all of the things that would defeat that color based on the type chart, because you get a bonus if you're playing I think it's electric into water, for example. And all of the supporters suck. They're either completely useless or completely broken. It feels like some things of the game were designed to encourage drafting it, but it's never stated in the rules that that's a thing that they want or that's a thing that's supposed to be happening. They've kind of just said this is how to play the game and described a constructed format. And so looking at it as if it's a constructed format, which is what I'm going to be doing, we're just going to assume that all of the useless supporters are useless, and we're just going to pick out some ideas that are going to help them potentially be more playable, or talk about what things need to be added, because in theory some of these problems could be solved by them adding additional sets. So let's have a look into that. Also, additionally, while we are still at the beginning of the video, they recently put out a thing where they are talking about what they are updating and changing. For example, a lot of the VTubers characters have got the wrong height on the cards, and they've already committed to changing all of the heights to be correct. I'm a little surprised as to how you could fuck that up. Surely it's given to you in a data set from the creator, but anyway, as well as a couple of misprints and stuff that they're going to be fixing in further sets. So they're not one and done. They are going to be making more new things, which means it's a perfect time for them to make it a good game instead of a bad game. But look, this is what I think that we need to fix at the base level to make it actually an interactive and fun game to play. And well, how are we going to dig into that, right? The first thing, I think probably the major problem to solve is there's no restrictions on color. And I don't think that there needs to be like, hey, you can only play like a Locarno, like you can pick 2 colors and that's it. I don't think that's necessarily a thing that needs to exist, but I think you need to design parts of the game that encourage people to pick specific colors that they want to play. If someone's like, oh man, Bao is my favorite VTuber, I want to play a deck with her in it, you're committed to water. You're like, okay, what am I going to put in the deck that's going to make her work? Well, you get 4 copies of her. You can get 4 more copies of a shitter version of her, and then 4 more copies of the shittest version, and 4 mascots that match. And you're like, and then what? Which is kind of, I don't know, I don't really like how that kind of works. It doesn't make any sense. There's like no, beyond that, and like I genuinely don't think that you would need to play that many copies of that single person. It doesn't, like, there's nothing else that really synergies beyond that. Like, that's, you have a 16 card deck or whatever, and then everything else is you figure out what supporters are maybe good or something. So it's kind of not great, and there's no like synergy in deck building because there's no real deck building. I spent some time and I built a single deck with the cards that exist, and I'm probably going to print it out and record and footage and play some to have a look at it. But basically, I think there's one deck. That one deck, the VTubers that you choose to put in each deck is one VTuber of each color. You get one level 8, which has specifically the ability that you discard a mascot to draw a new card, because it's the only good ability that they have. And then you play 2 10s. So it's 1 8 and 2 10s of one VTuber of each of the 5 colors. And because all the keywords exist in a cycle, there's exactly one VTuber for each color that has this specific ability. So that determines exactly which VTubers you're allowed to play. And then picking the 4 mascots that match each of those picks, which is 20 mascots, which is a good number to have. And then the rest is supports, that just the most broken supports. And I mentioned kind of like this breakdown in the previous video where I talked about the game, but I genuinely don't see any other deck needing to exist. You just play that, and there's no other deck. Which is kind of a problem when you don't have enough synergy in the design. People can't make choices. People can't investigate and try new different things and like look at different win conditions and stuff like that, because it doesn't exist. That's part of the thing that we need to try and build here. Because you kind of are punished for playing too fewer colors. If your opponent figures out that you're limited in one area, then they can punish that by like looking for it and playing into that. Knowing part of it is supposed to be this bluffing thing where it's like, am I overcommitting to this round, or am I undercommitting to this round? And your opponent knowing everything that's in your deck because you're playing one color gives them way more information than if they don't. And yeah, what thing can we add that would solve this problem? Well, I have a specific idea. It's giving 9s and 10s abilities, and it's, I think, probably just fixes the whole game, which is this one thing, honestly. And I'm calling it the cheer on mechanic. So at the end of each round, the way that the thing is played, mainly you play your power level card. It's an 8, 9, or a 10, and you play all these supporters and stuff, and that's how the round plays, right? You play all your extra cards, and then figure out how big the number is for your power level card, and then you measure up, and the person with the biggest one wins the round. And then everything's discarded, and you start again. And you go through maintenance, which is things you draw up to 5 or 6 cards, I think it is. And then the next round starts. And then you go, well, I just got a point. I just got to get to 5 points, and I got to get there before my opponent. Now, if power level cards persist, you'll start to build a roster of people that you've accumulated along the way. And the thing that I want that to do is that, let's say in the first round, I played a blue person. I played Bao, my favorite, right? And in the second round, I now have Bao, and she's cheering on for the next power level card, the next character I'm going to play. And she's providing blue energy, because Bao the Whale is a blue card, is providing blue energy to that new power level card that I've played. And if that power level card has an ability that requires blue energy, it can be activated. And so it means that the higher level cards, like the 10s, will have more expensive abilities, and so they're better to be played later in the game. 9s will have cheaper abilities, which is better to be played in the middle of the game, and 8s have an ability that don't cost anything, but the trade-off is that the power level is lower, and so they're better to play at the very beginning of the game. Suddenly, we have this gigantic depth of strategy instantly just by making the 9s and 10s do something. And I think that was what was most greatly lacking from the game so far. And so I think that's the great starting point. I'm going to give you an example. I mocked up an example of what it might look like This is Bow the Whale. This is the 10. So this is going to have slightly more expensive abilities than the other ones, but this is kind of what I had in mind. So the first ability is blue, blue. So if you, in any of the previous turns, had played 2 blue supporters, you can use this first ability. And the ability specifically is this round you may search for Pestonini, which is the matching mascot for Bow the Whale, and put it into your hand. Now the second ability, which does not cost blue, the second ability, which is Grass and Platinum, which are the allied colors for water. So each in the type chart, there's 5 things. There's 1 thing that you lose to, there's 1 thing that you win to, and there's 2 things you don't give a shit about. Using the 2 things that don't interact with you to make synergy deck building, they're called allied colors for this scenario. And basically it means that I can either pigeonhole myself and go and play a very, very blue deck, which means I'm going to have the very good ability where I search for the matching mascot out of my deck, which is going to help me win because mascots give you a massive, power boost to your matching character. But playing a mono color is a detriment. So if instead I'm playing 3 colors, I'm playing blue, green, and platinum, then I can use that ability. I can go this round, you may search for support and put it into your hand. And so that means that on the 3rd round, if I'm playing this on the 3rd round, I could activate one of these 2 abilities because I would have, the matching energy cost from the previous power level cards cheering me on. But on round 5 and onwards, I could potentially have 2 blue, 1 grass, 1 platinum, and I could activate both of these abilities, right? So if I'm actually working hard to meet the requirements, I can activate much more powerful abilities, and suddenly, the more consistent we are with our deck building, the more consistent we are at meeting these specific colors, the more powerful our 10s are going to be. And that means that if I'm stuck and I have to play a 10 early, that's going to be a detriment to me later on because I can't activate its abilities. But it's still a 10, it's still going to be greater than an 8. My opponent playing an 8 will be able to activate the free ability and maybe draw a card, maybe search for something. And then they've still got to, commit more cards from hand, maybe play a mascot, maybe play a support to be able to match the 10 that I'm already representing. And so there's already a bit more push and pull with what's going on, right? I think this is the bare minimum that's required to make the game actually an interactive TCG. But let's look at what's next. So what does the cheer up mechanic actually kind of do? It encourages deck building of allied colors. We did kind of cover that. It gives value to playing 8s early and 10s late, which I think is important. I think that 9s and 10s doing nothing, there's no reason to ever play a 9, but adding this mechanic means that 8s early, 9s middle, 10s late is the perfect timing to be able to do these different things. And 10s being able to use an ability on round 3 or 2 abilities on round 5, and 9s, if it's really only cost 1, then anywhere from like round 2 onwards you could be doing stuff. Round 3 you could be doing 2 different things and stuff like that. I think it gives you a lot more choice. Like if you actually have multiple power level cards in hand, picking out which ones you're going to be playing, you're either playing it because you know what energy it's going to be contributing to you later, or you know what abilities you'll be able to activate now when you are playing it. And I think that kind of decision making is rather than just, big number, boop, yep, got big number, which is what the game is currently, and it's a bit shit, unfortunately. And it helps build towards a natural game climax. As you're building up more energy and more resources, your opponent can potentially be guessing as to what cards you might be playing based on, what kind of things you can be activating. They'll be like, oh, you've just finally got blue, green, platinum. I know that you have the ability to play Bow the Whale. I might predict that that's a thing that you're going to be able to do because we've seen 0 copies of it yet. So I'm going to be waiting and playing my electric type one because I know it's going to have a type advantage. I'm going to be starting with 12, you're going to be starting with 10. That's going to give me an advantage, so I'm guessing that's what you're going to be doing. Or something like that. And as you build up and there's more abilities and stuff that you can activate, your stuff gets stronger naturally over time because you have access to more things. And then as you get closer towards the end of the game, Game 5, Game 6, Game 7, those final rounds are different from the first rounds. That's another thing that this game has a problem with, that there's no difference between any of the different rounds beyond perhaps what resources you've spent already. So if your opponent knows that you're missing out on something, they can probably predict that you're not going to play that, but it's really unlikely because deck construction isn't like really uniform at all. It's kind of chaotic. So I think that this would be a massive improvement. And here's the next thing. I want to actually run through the existing keywords in the game. So basically the way that they've designed all of the power level 8 cards is there's this rotating list of existing keywords, and all the power level cards of each type see each of these keywords once. So as I mentioned before, there's a specific one, small bargain, where if you discard a mascot to draw a card. I think that's the only good one, but there is exactly one VTuber with small bargain for every color, and the same goes for every keyword. So to play the only good keyword, then I only play that one particular VTuber for each color, and there's not really much point in playing any of the others. Now, firstly, if I'm playing an 8, for example, delayed reaction, which says if I lost this round, my next round gets +1 power, right? And so let's say next round I play a 10, I get +1 from the delayed reaction. First of all, I have to remember that that thing exists and that thing happened because that card has been discarded, instead of it just staying in play and I know that I have a guy there forever. But also +1, that's 10%. It's not very... I'm losing a whole round by playing an 8 to get a 10% benefit on the following round. That's shit. That's not good. I would never choose to do that. In Condottiere, the game that I brought up in the previous video, which is basically a similar combat style to what VCard TCG is trying to do, there's this whole thing where, and usually because there's multiple opponents, you're trying to push your luck in how much you're committing to winning a round. People can make you overcommit and they can return resources to their hand, which kind of you can do in VCard, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And like undercommit, there's like a scarecrow thing that you can play and return cards to your hand so that you're not overcommitted, you put some good cards back. But also you're trying to figure out, you know, who's really winning harder, who's really winning less. But it's all about, do I throw this round so I have good cards for another round that's more important to me, or is this round really important to me? And the way that you figure out how important something is because there is a map and you're trying to get territories close to each other to win the game. If you're in a territory really far away from other stuff that you've conquered, it's not that important to you to win. And so you go, well, I'm going to throw this one. I'm going to try and make you commit some resources to it so it's not for free, but I'm going to try and keep all my best stuff later so I can win at a more important location. This doesn't have that. This game just goes, oh, well, you lost a round, sucked in, that's it. Go to the next one. It's +1 power for the next round after intentionally losing. I would just never play that card. It's not good. And so a lot of these keywords kind of enter that same problem. Like you can see a lot of them say +1 power. Echoing power is +1 this round if you lost last round. So that 8 is actually a 9. So just play a 9 instead. Why would you ever play the 8? Why would you ever play that 8? Delayed reaction, if you lose this round, +1 next round is okay compared to some of the other ones, I guess. But again, it makes your 10 and 11. Most of the other ones, if you don't draw 10 and you're playing all these damn 8s, then it's just a 9 again. It's still no point. Cautious step, if the same element as last round, +1 power. So it's turning an 8 into a 9. Just play a 9. Small bargain, which I think is the only good one. You discard a mascot to draw a card. And the reason why this is good is you discard a mascot that's of the wrong color of the power level card that you've played this turn, to hopefully draw another, either a supporter or another mascot that is of a relevant color. That's really the only scenario I think you should ever be playing in 8. Let's go to part 2. So, quick glance, look at the top card of your deck. You may put it on the bottom. There is very little card draw. Small bargain is the main one, and then there's happiness charm. That's it. There's no other card draw. Why do I want to look at the top card of my deck? I'm drawing 6, right? If I'm drawing 6 cards in my maintenance to get back to a full hand, looking at the top 1 card doesn't do shit. If I'm searching my deck for a card and putting it on top, that's me saying, if I lose this round, next round, that card that I search for is going to win me the round. And so losing this round, it's worth playing the 8 for it. just looking at the top card and putting on the bottom doesn't do shit. Doesn't help me at all get anywhere. Next is Gentle Parity. If you play the same element as your opponent plus on power, this one is a little interesting. Assuming your opponent plays an 8, and assuming your opponent plays something that is the same element as you, then you will get an advantage. And they obviously can't be playing Gentle Parity as well. So your +1 power is going to break, that tie. It's yay. They could just play a 9, same as you could just play a 9. I think a lot of the keywords are designed around them expecting you to play all of the 8s, all of the 9s, all of the 10s of your VTuber of choice. But that's not good. It's just like actually very bad with the system that they've encouraged, because there's nothing that actually gives you advantage out of playing one color or few colors. And specifically because with the mascot, right? If I'm playing just Bow and I'm playing all 12 Bow cards, I have one mascot that I get 4 copies of to fulfill everything that she needs. And then I have other mascots that are just going to do a shitter job because they don't match. Rather than playing multiple different VTubers and multiple different mascots that line up 1-to-1 with them. So I think it's not good. We have Calm Response. If your opponent plays a support, your next mascot is +1. This one is interesting because I'm unsure how many times this can trigger. And it also, at least within a round, lets you go, ooh, my opponent's played a support, now I can play my mascot, and it informs you as to when good timing is for things. So this one could potentially be good, especially if you have like a mascot heavy hand, because you can't pick your power level when you will have a lot of mascots. This might be good, but it's still, your opponent knows it's there. Your opponent does not have to commit supports to a round, so they could just not play supports on that round. It's very easy to play around. And the last one is, if you win without playing a mascot, +1 next round. So if I win because my opponent's hand is dog shit, I get to have a slightly better round next round, but it's on an 8. What if my opponent just plays a 10 and then I don't play a mascot and I have to win that round? How the fuck am I supposed to do that? Mascot's where most of your power comes from. So I think a lot of the existing keywords are very bad, actually. And I have some ideas as to what should replace them, but what kind of things is needed to make this more of a playable TCG? And what kind of things do we need to do to the supports, and what kind of abilities overall it needs to come together to make this all work is kind of what I want to have a look at. I kind of want to generally go through the supports, but also like there's some ideas about what the keywords and stuff should be replaced with or do or something as well. Basically, all 8s, 9s, and 10s should be completely overhauled and have all different abilities. And some of the supports have got to be the same. So let's quickly run through the supports and then we'll wrap. The first one is Guardians and the Shields are irrelevant. This one was kind of something that I pointed out as a lazy card design, where they just picked one thing and then they did it for all of the different colors. Because currently there's no synergy between any of the colors, it's best practice to play every single color. And if everyone's playing every single color, which is best practice, all of the Guardians and Shields, the odds of you having the correct one that you need for the scenario is so low that there's no point on it taking up a valuable space in your deck. And that just kind of makes it irrelevant. At least if there's a scenario where you go, okay, I have Bow the Whale, I'm like really invested in blue, and I have some grass and I have some platinum, that's my deck. I know that I'm going to encounter stuff that I'm weak to, like electric, VTubers power level cards that I have to deal with because they're going to have an advantage on weakness. I might put in some of those cards that are going to match the elements that I'm worried about, and that suddenly makes more sense. Now, when it's so spread out, there's not really any point. And I do want to reiterate, the reason why you should not be playing all one color is because it gives your opponent advantage and they know what's going on, and you're not getting an upside for limiting yourself into being able to win that type matchup. If I'm playing only blue and my opponent is not weak to water, I get no advantage. If my opponent is playing all 5 colors and I'm playing all 5 colors, there's opportunities for us to play things that have advantageous type matchups at all times. So it's kind of irrelevant. It's kind of bad, but it's also one of those things where they like release it in the first set and then maybe it becomes relevant later on because they do actually make more of a synergy deck. Maybe they take some of my ideas. Maybe they rip me off and don't credit me and they make the game actually good. Who knows? The next one is Harpoon. So Harpoon is the only support card that mentions a character by name, and it just, if you're playing Shy Lily, it just says fuck you in particular. There's no other character that suffers the same downside. And so if Shy Lily is your favorite character and you want to play her, you have to be aware that people could be playing Harpoon and ruining your day. No other person has to worry about this. So unless if they're going to print more of these cards, that seems terrible. It seems like kneecapping your own fan base. So I don't understand why this exists. In let's say Magic the Gathering, for example, there's a lot of cards in specifically like sets like Innistrad, which have like a really creature type theme. There's a lot of cards that will have an advantage over a specific creature type, and a lot of the creature types have synergy like within them, right? Like all the werewolves and stuff, jam and work really well. So if you'd have werewolves, then you have a card that gives you advantage against vampires. It's not like the vampire player knowing that this thing that beats vampires exists just gets to have a shit time. They just know that people have this tool to help them beat you, and none of them are good enough for it to really matter. Harpoon is actually like kind of relevant, and so why design this card? There's no point to it. Next is Exposed. So Exposed is a support that lets you look at your opponent's hand, but that's it. It doesn't get you any power. The upside is that you get to see potentially how hard your opponent may want to commit to something, and it's too costly a resource. I think losing a card in hand, losing the support for that play, I think is just not great. And also it can potentially communicate to your opponent that not in like a bluff, but like in a read where they might just pull that round, just like play out their junk cards so that they can refresh it the next round, making you lose all of that information. But if this is on a character ability, all of the 8s that have the ability to look at your opponent's hand actually have a better chance of winning the round despite having the power deficit. And so I think that that's maybe one of the examples where it should be a character ability instead of a support, and like actually have support slots that do a bit more, because if it's on the power level card, it's -1 card that you need to make this effect happen. Like it's printed on the thing that you already have to play every round, instead of on a support that you kind of are relying on to get power that's going to win you the round. And so I think that is maybe a missed opportunity. The Cyanide Chant and Happiness Chant I think are the most broken cards in the game, both because it means that you don't have to commit to as many rounds to play those cards, but also it says draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. It's also really the only card draw in the game, and so there's no reason to ever not play it. And it's also the only discard opponent cards in the game, and so there's no reason to not play it. Now, I think that they're super broken. It should be in every deck. And my suggestion for the fix is there's a card in the Pokemon TCG called Cross Switcher, and it has a line of text on it that says you must play 2 cards to activate this card's effect, because it doesn't do anything if you have only one of them. Cyanide Chant and Happiness Chant currently says that if you play one of them, you can play the other one for free, basically. So why not make it a requirement instead? You can only play this card if you have both of them. You get to draw 2 cards. Your opponent gets to discard 2 cards. It's no different from how it's currently played, except that I can't just draw 2 cards, or I can't just make you discard 2 cards. And then suddenly, if you have a hand that has one or the other one in it, you go, well, I'm not going to do it this round. I now have to, wait until I have the next round starts, and I maybe find the other half of it, and are able to go and, kind of have that big swinging turn. But I think that currently, because there's not enough things that just let you draw 1 card or whatever, you're kind of relying on the ones that you just kind of drew for turn. Get up to your 6 cards, where like you can't really dig, you can't really search, you can't really go any further than that. It doesn't do anything. The other thing is that it can't be stopped. So Reaper, the next one that I have on here with the many question marks, Reaper basically says cancel the effect of a played support. Now, this game doesn't have the stack like Magic the Gathering. Both Cyanide and Happiness have an immediate effect where the number of cards in hand is changed. Reaper can't unfuck that. It can't cancel that. It's happened already. And in like competitive level TCG games, when cards in an unknown state become known, you cannot rewind that. You can't, hit them with the neuralizer so they forget the 2 cards that you discarded into a public zone. You can't cancel the effects of this card. And so Reaper, the thing that says cancel the effect of a support, which can stop stuff that adds a lot of power potentially, like Double Down, or removes power like Butcher. What's the point if it can't cancel the best fucking card in the game? So I think Reaper should be changed so it says the next support that your opponent plays this round does nothing. So your opponent either has to play something crap first that gets cancelled and does nothing, and they're paying the cost of paying a card so they can play something big and strong afterwards, or they hold their supports and they play it in future rounds, which means that it's actually a bit more strategic in how it's going, but also Reaper can stop people from Cyanide happening. As there's also a card, White Knight, which stops Reaper from doing things. So you would have to reword White Knight slightly so that if you played White Knight first, White Knight would stop Reaper, and then the next support that you play does nothing, or is not stopped from doing nothing. But then White Knight would have to additionally do something else, because otherwise just playing that support is fulfilling the requirements of stopping Reaper from cancelling the thing afterwards, because White Knight's the one that's cancelled. White Knight just basically says whatever the thing was that was cancelled, this stops it. It's like if you cancel something ages ago, I can go back and turn its effect back on, which again doesn't interact with Cyanide and Happiness at all. So I think something there needs to be fixed, man. It just doesn't work. The whole point of Reaper to me is to stop people from playing the best damn card in the game, or just give us other things that draw cards, and so that we're not so heavily relying on this one thing to be able to do stuff. If there was a power level 8 card that just said draw 2 cards, it would be so playable. It would be so much more playable than literally every other keyword. I just think the game is missing a lot. But there's 2 more things. So there is the supporter battle cry, where how it works currently is that you would pick up the power level card that you have, and then you would play a different one from your hand. This is really good for changing the typing of a power level card that you have, but it kind of requires you to have those cards in hand. And the chances of you having 2 power level cards in the 5 or 6 cards that you have in hand is not high. So, and then battle cry is another -1 card. So the power boost that you would have to get off that would have to be specifically putting in something that gets the weakness advantage of +2. So it's like, okay, I'm picking up my 8, I'm playing a 12 on you, and then I have 3 cards left in hand, one of which is the power level card that I picked up, that 4th card. I'm now relying on a much smaller hand size to be able to do a thing. What Battlecry should do instead is you play the supporter. Battlecry says, well, I'm going to shuffle the power level card that I played this turn into the deck, and then I'm going to search for one to replace it with. And you might have to search for something that has the same power level but could be a named person or different color. Or you can just be, the one that you search for, you go and get something that matches the mascot in your hand. It suddenly gives you a bit more strategic option in interacting with stuff. So much of the game requires you to have just drawn a great hand to win a round, when no cards actually help you do that. And then the next one, Snack Cat. So we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Snack Cat says that all of your mascots at the end of the round are put into your hand instead of being discarded. I think it's specifically only if you lose a round. But the thing is, if I play out my 4 mascots, and then my power level guy loses, and then I play a Snack Cat, right, and I have 3-ish mascots left. I play all the mascots, I lose the round anyway. Snack Cat puts the 3 mascots back in my hand, and I draw back up with maintenance. Now, the odds of me drawing a new power level card is nothing, is so low that I'm basically forced to take a mulligan, and if that mulligan doesn't succeed, I lose the round. Snack Cat just feels like bait that makes you lose the game. And I think that you need to change it so that those mascot cards are put into your hand after you've drawn back to the 6, so you have like a bigger hand size. So it's like actually card advantage, so it's like actually value. A lot of this video really just feels like me doubling down on the original claim from my first video, where basically they've not consulted with a game designer, they don't have enough experience in game design, and they've made a TCG that's really lackluster. It's not, it hasn't been created by someone with enough skill. And look, I feel like I have gone through and suggested a couple of things that would make a big difference. I think that the cheater on mechanic could potentially just save the whole game right away, because it solves some of the major problems that I think that it has. And then the rest of it would be like, okay, how do we balance card advantage? How do we balance being able to, match up, deck building, all these kind of things, and trying to, force this synergy into the game. And then going and changing what some of the keywords and stuff are. Having keywords that give you more incremental advantages or like minor things, rather than just +1 power. Being able to search for things, like being able to do stuff like look at the top card of the deck to support, put it in your hand, would be so much better than just look at the top card of the deck and then maybe put it on the bottom, which does nothing for you. It doesn't have to be just the top one card, it could be a couple cards and you find support, put it in your hand, or whatever. Having a look at a bunch of different effects that are going to give you minor card advantage is going to make this game way more fun. A lot of the things that make let's start with Pokemon TCG, right? Pokemon TCG, you will see that on the very, very first turn of the game, or for each player most of the time, they will perform somewhere between 15 and 20 actions and then pass. Like, often it takes minutes, and you're just watching there waiting for minutes before it is your turn. Because that's the setup. You need to spend all your time setting up so that you have the board set to progress through and play the game. Magic the Gathering doesn't quite have the same thing. Magic the Gathering plays more to a choppy tempo where you're trying to just imagine it's like a rhythm game and you're playing the drums and you're trying to do your best to keep the tempo. And if you drop the tempo, your opponent starts winning. And if you drop the beat entirely, you lose the game. That's what Magic the Gathering feels like. Except for some archetypes like Storm, where you do like a little bit, and then you just have one big turn that goes for 7 minutes, and you hand your opponent a colouring in book so they have something to do while you're playing the game by yourself. And this game doesn't have that. It has the Condottiere combat where you're trying to push your luck against your opponent. You're like kind of playing out some stuff and you're trying to threat assessment all the time, but you're never interacting with anything that's too hidden. You're never, never having like a big, crazy turn. You're never like actually digging to try and find an answer. You could just both play your hands face up and go, yours had a bigger number than mine. Okay, let's just draw the next 5. Well, again, yours had a bigger number than mine. I just don't think there's enough game there to be able to call it a trading card game. I think it's just a collectible. And that's kind of unfortunate. I really wanted to love this, but I wanted to dig a little into the needed supports for the game. So the first one is card filtering and /searching. There's currently no deck search in the game, and there's not really any card filtering. The mascot discard the draw card is really the only one, and we could just use a lot more of discard draw, or look at the top X and put a type of card into your hand. Or the one that I really like at the moment is Pokemon Communication, which was just added to Pokemon TCG Pocket, where you pick something of a type, in this case it's a Pokemon, and then it gets shuffled into your deck, and then you are given a new thing of that type. Something like that could be fine. It could literally be discard a mascot of a color to go and get a mascot of a different color, or discard a mascot of a color to go and get another mascot of the same color. Like if I'm playing mono blue and I have Bow in play, but I have the wrong blue mascot, what if I had a card that swapped out that mascot for the actual one that I wanted the entire time? Or being able to change the color of the mascot so I can cancel my opponent's mascot. I think that there's just something needed there, so that I have more power over what I'm doing rather than just showing you the 5 cards that I have in my hand. There's also no specific color strategies. In Magic the Gathering, if a person starts playing a bunch of mountains, you go, oh, I'm expecting that I'm going to be taking a lot of damage kind of quickly, and you're going to be casting spells that deal damage to my face. You're maybe going to play a lot of little creatures. It has a defined identity of what I can expect based on the information I'm given. My opponent goes, here's Bow the Whale. And I go, what the fuck does that mean for me? Great. how is blue different from any other color other than the fact that it loses to yellow and it beats red? It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. The colors don't mean anything. There's no specific strategies that give me an advantage of picking one color over another, other than the fact that maybe the character that I like is in a particular color. Like, there's no actual benefit or strategy. And one of the other things that I think the game really needs is things that persist from early rounds into later rounds. That's what I like about the Chiron mechanic, is that you're building something over time. The characters that you play at the beginning are helping you out at the end, and the characters that you play at the end are more powerful because of it. This could also be the same for supports. This could also be the same for mascots. It could be something that you play now, and it does nothing right now, but it does something later on, and your opponent can see that it's happening and it exists, but it's gaining value over time or whatever. Like, it might be like, for each round that you lose, it gains a charge counter, and then for every charge counter on it, you gain 1 power, in all the consecutive rounds or whatever. Like, think like a team fight tactics type thing. And like, the more rounds you lose early on, the more powerful you are later, based on how you've managed your finances or whatever. And I think that the game needs that as well. And so, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm disappointed. I saw the announcement for the VCard TCG. There you go. We've got this gigantic roster of creators. All the creators have their own fan base and market. It's almost guaranteed they're going to have a lot of people that are going to want to be playing this game and having a look in it. I'm really disappointed that it's just not a good game. It's just a collectible. It just feels like a cash grab. And just VCard, if you're watching this, reach out. I will happily let you look at some of the ideas that I have written down and put together to make the game better. Well, currently, I'm disappointed. I've played through so many TCGs. I have accolades in a lot of different categories when it comes to playing the card game, because that's literally my chosen career. I've designed a whole TCG called Cutlass. You can literally find content of that on this channel, where I go through and talk about how that game works, and also show you what deck construction is like. And there's only 45 unique cards or something like that. And then deck construction is actually insanely tight and difficult to make choices, and you always have 3 or 4 cards that you wish you could have included, because everything is really impactful and has really high synergy with each other, and you're trying to weigh up, how much am I going to need this and how much am I going to suffer if I don't have it. VCard doesn't have that, and maybe it could. So look, if you are interested in more game design stuff, I do actually make a lot of content talking about game design, and not just ragging on other ones who are doing it badly. Sometimes it's looking at what it needs, or looking at what something gets done well, or something like that. And I have a lot of that kind of stuff on the channel. And I just have like a lot of other random cool stuff as well. I will put some stuff up on the screen, you can check it out. We do a bunch of game design discussion. I do a lot of Let's Plays. I'm doing a lot of playing board games. I do play a lot of TCGs and talk about deck tech and stuff like that as well. So check out some of that stuff. And then maybe when we see a set 2, see a set 3, we might see how the game grows a little bit over time. So I don't know, stick around. Maybe we'll do a follow-up. I'm looking at printing out some cards from the first set and playing some games and seeing what it plays like, so that people can actually, get a view of how things are working. So stick around for that one.